The hearing room was packed, marble walls, velvet seats, the quiet hum of 1,000 expectations. This wasn't just another congressional oversight session, it was spectacle dressed in law. The flashing bulbs of news cameras bounced off polished wood and tension-heavy silence as C-SPAN streamed it live into living rooms and history books. Barron Trump sat rigid in the witness chair, jaw locked, eyes fixed on nothing. The boy once hidden from the public eye had grown tall, solemn, and still. The air around him trembled with a peculiar charge, not guilt, not fear, something more unknowable. Jasmine Crockett watched him from across the room, her case files spread before her like war plans. She knew the danger of this moment. She also knew its necessity. "Mr. Trump," she began, voice measured, clear, slicing through the silence like a gavel. "You weren't just protected, you were positioned. And the question we're asking today is whether you were ever told the truth about why." Gasps whispered across the rows. Barron didn't flinch, but the flush in his neck betrayed the sudden heat beneath his collar. Behind him, his legal counsel shifted. To his left, a row of Republican aides looked up from their notes, suddenly aware that this would not be a routine hearing. This wasn't a circus. This was a reckoning, and it had just begun. Jasmine's voice grew sharper, not loud, but unshakable. "We are not here today to crucify a teenager," she began, "but to examine the machinery that protects political bloodlines at the cost of legal accountability." She tapped her pen once precisely. A screen behind her lit up with a chart. Generations of political dynasties. Bush, Kennedy, Clinton, and the vast financial trust structures behind their names. But the Trump name glowed red. It wasn't a trust fund, it was a pipeline. In 2019, Barron Trump was listed as a junior advisor to two shell companies based in Florida and New York. The positions were ceremonial, but the money wasn't. An image of a corporate registration form filled the screen. The signature box was marked BJT. Jasmine didn't blink. At 14, Mr. Trump's name was used to facilitate over $4.3 million in asset transfers across these entities. These accounts avoided scrutiny because they were tied to a minor. Barron shifted in his seat. He wasn't a politician. He was a student, a son, maybe even a pawn, and Jasmine knew it. This country has long allowed the children of power to operate as silent shields, absorbing wealth, absorbing immunity, and absorbing public sympathy. Chapter 2. The education mismatch, elite schools, shell corps, missing accountability. Jasmine stepped to the screen again, this time bringing up a map of institutions: Columbia Grammar Preparatory School, the Oxbridge Tutoring Program, a stint at the American School in Switzerland. The public was told Barron Trump was simply focused on his education. But financial disclosures, subpoenaed email threads, and internal memos tell a different story. The screen changed. Emails from former Trump Organization assistants appeared in sequence. One was time-stamped 2020. Transfer to J4Ed Holdings complete. Note: initials must match Barron's documents. Avoid flagging. A photo of the filing appeared. J4Ed Holdings LLC. Registered in Delaware. Listed member, B.J. Trump. Jasmine let the silence settle. That company was created during Mr. Trump's sophomore year of high school. It has no products, no services, no employees. But it moved $2.1 million in Q3 alone. Barron's lawyer shifted, whispering urgently into his ear. He nodded, but didn't speak. His eyes flicked to the screen, then back down. "This wasn't education," Jasmine continued. "It was insulation. The illusion of academy. See, isolation was used as a front for corporate redirection." She turned back to the panel. "And yet, none of these entities were audited. Not one of them triggered a single federal review. Why? Because they carried the name of a minor." She turned to Barron now. "Mr. Trump, did you ever question how a 15-year-old had an equity position in a company that shared an address with a Serbian telecom partner under U.S. surveillance?" Barron's lips parted slightly. But still, he said nothing. The room had gone cold. Outside, a dozen protesters chanted behind metal barricades, voices rising with each word. Inside, it was dead quiet, and Jasmine wasn't done. Not even close. Jasmine adjusted the display, and another slide clicked into place, this one bearing the initials SWW and a familiar name attached in the CC line. Stephanie Winston Wolkoff. The American public was told Melania Trump kept herself out of politics, that she was a mother first, a wife second, and a first lady only in title. But documents obtained through committee subpoena show a far more coordinated role behind the scenes. She paced slowly now, each word deliberate. In 2020, Ms. Wolkoff sent an encrypted message regarding what she called the Slovenian firewall. In it she wrote, and I quote, "Make sure it's scrubbed. B's name can't show up yet. It's not safe." Barron's expression didn't change, but his shoulders subtly tightened. Jasmine turned to him. "You were a minor. You couldn't open offshore holdings. But she could, and she did, in your name." The screen now revealed a document marked Trust Agreement, Guardian Override, with Melania Trump's digital signature clearly visible. This wasn't parenting, it was positioning. This trust account was structured not to protect you, but to protect assets tied to Balkan real estate and foreign licensing entities. The chamber began to shift. Reporters furiously typed, "One aide from the Republic." Kincaid slipped into the hallway. Jasmine leaned in. "Ms. Trump has long insisted she shielded you from the political world. But shielding doesn't include creating anonymous financial corridors with your child's identity as the password." Barron turned to his legal counsel, lips parted, but still silent. The room felt like a wire pulled tight, seconds from snapping. "She wasn't keeping the world from you, Mr. Trump. She was keeping you from the world, until she needed you." Someone in the back exhaled, loud enough for the mics to pick it up. The chairman banged his gavel once, not for order, but for emphasis. And Jasmine just stood there, eyes on Barron, waiting. But he didn't meet her gaze. Jasmine walked slowly back to her seat, flipping the next tab in her binder without looking down. The screen changed again, now displaying a timeline labeled Shadow Activity, Summer Internships. A photo appeared. Mar-a-Lago, Summer 2021. In the corner of the frame, a tall teenage boy sat at a desk, back turned to the camera, staring at a laptop. Next to him, a man in a blue suit blurred his face with his hand. "Mr. Trump, the public was told you were enjoying a quiet summer, but records show you were granted encrypted communications access under the Trump.org internal portal. Your access ID was tied to an email that routed messages through a Luxembourg-based proxy." She let the words hang. Why does a high school student need end-to-end encrypted servers to help his father over the summer? Barron's jaw tensed. Behind him, his attorney leaned forward, ready to object, but Jasmine kept going before he could speak. "One of the emails includes your initials and the subject line. Wire routes confirmed. Asset freeze window opens Monday." That same week, $750,000 was moved through a shell company registered to a post office box in the Caymans. She turned to the committee. "These aren't coincidences. They're footprints." Barron finally spoke, his voice quiet but audible. "I didn't know what I was looking at. I was just doing what they told me." Jasmine didn't blink. "You were a teenager. I understand that. But the question is not whether you understood the consequences. The question is, were you ever told the truth about the purpose?" The silence stretched long. He didn't answer. She looked down briefly, then up again, and her voice softened, almost imperceptibly. "Because intention matters, but so does participation. And every click, every approval, every silence, it leaves a trail." The projection behind her faded to black, and for a second, so did the room. The lights dimmed slightly as Jasmine raised the remote and brought up the next file. This time, the seal of the Department of Treasury appeared, and beneath it, the title, Confidential, Balkan Asset Activity, 2018 to 2021. This is where the story stops being domestic. A new set of documents filled the screen, each stamped and authenticated. Jasmine spoke slowly, her voice like the slow pull of a trigger. In 2018, a Slovenian construction conglomerate received a sudden influx of capital through a US-linked investor listed only as BJT Holdings. The transaction was small, insignificant on its own. But 2 years later, that same conglomerate was cited in a UN intelligence brief for acting as a financial corridor between Serbian oligarchs and unregistered US political entities. The words hit the room like a silent bomb. She stepped forward, locking eyes with Barron. "BJT. That's you, Mr. Trump. At least, that's the name used." Barron blinked rapidly. His throat shifted, but no sound came. "We subpoenaed Melania Trump's former attorney. In his deposition, he confirmed the name was used to create a foreign asset holding company that legally shielded U.S. beneficiaries, including minors." She let the screen go dark. No more slides. Just the echo of the room breathing in disbelief. This was not accidental. This was careless. This was precision. Built on your name, timed during your adolescence, and protected by diplomatic distance. A Republican aide stood to leave. A reporter knocked over a water bottle. Neither sound broke Jasmine's cadence. "Mr. Trump, do you understand what it means for your name to appear in a sealed UN briefing about transnational laundering networks?" Barron's voice cracked when he finally whispered, "No." Jasmine didn't smile, didn't react. She simply looked at him with the weight of every headline already being typed. That's the problem. Outside, protesters were already chanting louder. The sidewalk trembled with unrest. Inside, history was being recorded. Barron's attorney finally rose. His shoes echoed across the polished marble floor like slow thunder. He adjusted his cufflinks, a small, nervous delay, and cleared his throat before speaking. "Madam Chairwoman, with all due respect, we request an immediate recess. My client is not on trial. He is a private citizen. These documents, this entire trajectory of questioning, amounts to a public crucifixion." He turned to Jasmine, measured but sharp. "You are not conducting a hearing. You are staging a spectacle." Jasmine stepped forward without hesitation, her voice unwavering. "No, Mr. Sanders, I am staging accountability." The gallery stirred again. A young woman in the back audibly gasped. One of the house interns shifted her weight, unsure whether to record or just absorb the moment. Jasmine turned back to Barron. "You said you didn't understand what it meant to be named in that report. That's fair. You were a teenager, but every time you signed a wire authorization, every time your name appeared on an LLC registration, you crossed from innocence into architecture." Barron didn't move. His lips parted slightly, not to argue, but to breathe. It was getting harder to do that. Kat kept her tone calm, almost maternal. "Do you remember transferring $2.3 million to a Zurich-based security fund listed under Clement Infrastructure Solutions? That was 2 days after a proxy account in Montenegro exploded in valuation." He didn't answer. She didn't need him to. "I know you remember the yacht," she added. "The one moored in Kotor, the one registered under a shell company belonging to your cousin's godfather." The entire room inhaled. That yacht was later used to transport encrypted tech to Dubai, tech that was traced back to restricted military patents. Sanders slammed his hand on the table. "This is insane." "No," Jasmine interrupted sharply. "This is what happens when wealth walks without a leash. You raised your name like a flag, Mr. Trump. You stitched it onto contracts. You hid it behind law firms, and you assumed the world would never connect the dots." Barron looked smaller now, not just quiet. Shrunken. The silence in the courtroom was sacred. Outside, sirens inched closer. Inside, the storm had already landed. And Crockett wasn't finished. Representative Holt adjusted his glasses. He had sat quietly through most of the hearing, watching, listening, calculating. But now, as Jasmine's words hung in the air like smoke after gunfire, his hand twitched near the microphone. She turned to face the committee directly. "Let me ask you something," Jasmine said, her tone quieter now, but no less dangerous. "When did we decide that silence was the price of power?" No one answered. She pointed toward the massive dossier in front of her. "This case was flagged in 2021, flagged again in 2022. It crossed desks, it tripped alarms, and each time, someone muted the signal." She looked at Holt. "You were on the oversight subcommittee at the time, weren't you?" He looked down at his notes, pretended to read. She took a step closer. Did you ever ask why these financial trials were scrubbed from the final report? Did you wonder why forensic audits disappeared from the shared server? He finally spoke, a whisper into the mic. There wasn't enough proof. She didn't flinch. Then why did the auditors who filed those reports all resign within 6 months? No reply. And why? She continued, turning to the rest of the panel. Did this committee greenlight a closed-door ruling that sealed the documentation involving over $600 million in foreign transfers? Holt's hands began to tremble. Barely. You know what I think? She said, almost gently. I think this country isn't broken. I think it's been held hostage by men who think the rules don't apply to them, and by the cowards who let them. Someone in the gallery gasped. Reporters began scribbling furiously. Then Holt whispered it, barely audible, but the microphone caught it. I tried to stop it. Jasmine froze. He looked up, eyes glassy. I tried, he said louder now, trembling. I brought it to judiciary. I was told to stand down. That there were family complications involved. That if I pushed harder, my seat wouldn't survive re-election. Jasmine blinked once. What family complications? She asked, her voice suddenly razor-thin. Holt hesitated, his jaw clenched. He looked toward Barron, then whispered again. She wasn't supposed to be on the documents. She who? Jasmine asked. Say it. Silence. And then, Melania. The room exploded. Gasps, chairs scraping, reporters shouting questions over each other. Someone dropped their phone trying to hit record. Jasmine didn't move. But her eyes, they burned now. Because everything had just changed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom like a sudden gust of wind. Cameras clicked like a swarm of insects. Barron stood motionless, his gaze flickering toward his father, who refused to meet his eye. Jasmine took a single step forward. Her voice dipped into something quieter, colder. This wasn't about protecting your son. This was about protecting your image. Barron's jaw clenched. His fingers curled into his palms, but he didn't speak. It was as if all the layers of privilege and polish were being peeled away, and beneath them was just a boy, lost, maybe even ashamed. Senator Cruz shifted in his seat, suddenly hyper-aware of the silence swallowing the room. The judge didn't bang his gavel. He simply watched. Everyone did. Do you know what it means? Jasmine said, voice trembling with restrained fire. To grow up knowing that the truth will never be enough, because someone richer, louder, or more powerful will bury it? She turned to the jury. This young man deserves better than to be a pawn. And this country deserves better than a father who turns the justice system into his own family's firewall. The jury foreman blinked rapidly, clearly shaken. A low murmur rolled from the crowd, from the journalists seated along the aisle to the law clerks whose pens stopped mid-sentence. Then came the moment no one expected. Barron looked up, and he spoke. I didn't want any of this. The voice was thin but carried. Jasmine stopped. The room stilled. Even the cameras paused, panning slowly toward the witness box. I told them I didn't want to press charges. I begged them not to turn it into a case. But, he swallowed, they said it would make me look weak, that I had to handle it like a trump. His shoulders dropped. I wasn't allowed to grieve in public. I wasn't even allowed to cry. Tears finally broke down his mask. The courtroom was dead silent. One woman in the back covered her mouth. A reporter wiped his eyes. Jasmine said nothing. She didn't have to. The truth had spoken for itself, and the spell was broken. The judge shifted. We will recess for 15 minutes. As the room began to stir again, Jasmine looked toward the back where an aide held up a phone. A message had just come in, from a figure no one expected to comment, Michelle Obama. And her words would change everything. In courtroom. Minutes later, recess. The room buzzed like a shaken beehive. Lawyers whispered, cameras adjusted. The judge had stepped out, but all eyes were now locked on Jasmine, who stood still, her aide approaching with the phone. whispers. It's real. It's verified. She sent it directly to your office, marked urgent. Jasmine took the phone and read the message aloud, low at first, then rising with clarity. Jasmine, reading. To the young people watching this trial, you are not defined by the legacy you inherit. You are defined by the truth you choose to stand in. Michelle Obama. A stunned hush blanketed the room again. Jasmine looked up, straight into the sea of press, lawmakers, and skeptics. She didn't write that for me. She wrote that for him, she said, gesturing toward Barron, who sat frozen, a child still learning how to survive the machinery of legacy. Suddenly her voice sharpened again. And it's time we stop treating truth like a luxury for the powerful. Senator Lee interrupts. Objection. Irrelevant emotional manipulation. Jasmine. No, Senator. The manipulation happened when this courtroom became a stage for political erasure. She paced slowly. This isn't about a teenager's past. It's about whether this system belongs to all of us, or just the loudest names in gold letters. Barron, quietly. She's right. The words fell like a dropped glass. Barron, louder, trembling. She's right. I don't want to be part of the lie anymore. Trump, in the back of the courtroom, finally stood. Trump shouts, "Sit down, Barron. You're making a fool of yourself." But Barron didn't sit. He stood. Barron, you made a fool out of all of us, Dad. The press erupted. Phones flew up. But Jasmine never turned around to look at Trump. Her eyes stayed on Barron. And for the first time, maybe, he didn't look like the enemy.